My hand was wrapped so tight around the phone that my knuckles had gone white, and I didn't even feel it until later, when the marks were still there the next morning. Behind me, through the kitchen doorway, I could hear ice clinking in a glass. My mother's voice low, the way she talks when she thinks the swinging door is enough to keep a secret. Keep the sweet one. Send the older girl back. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there in my own hallway, in my own house, listening to my mother talk about my daughters like they were items on a return counter. Nobody in that dining room knew I could hear them. Nobody knew what I was about to do about it. 2. Narrator introduction. My name is Dana Whitfield. I'm 41 years old, and 15 years ago I took a $4,000 loan from a credit union that almost said no, and I turned it into Whitfield & Company Catering, a business that last year brought in $2.3 million in revenue and put my name on the wedding calendars of half the venues in the county. I built that company with flour under my fingernails and a folding table as my first office. I built it while raising 2 daughters. Ivy, 14, my daughter from my first marriage, the one who used to fall asleep in a high chair in the back of my very first commercial kitchen. And Junie, 8, my daughter with my husband Marcus, born the year the business finally turned a profit. 2 girls. 1 mother. No difference between them as far as I was concerned, not for one single day of their lives. But my mother, Eleanor Whitfield, 73 years old, sharp as a blade under all that lavender perfume and church lady sweetness, had never fully let go of the fact that Ivy wasn't hers. Not by blood. And there was something else at stake that Sunday night, something worth more than sentiment. A family trust set up by my late father, worth just under $1.8 million, meant to be split between his grandchildren when he passed. Both granddaughters. Equally. That had always been the plan. Until, apparently, it wasn't. It was a Sunday dinner, same as always. Pot roast, my mother's good china. My sister Portia showing up 20 minutes late in a blazer that cost more than my first commercial oven. Portia is 38, works in wealth consulting, which as far as I can tell means she has never once consulted anyone about anything except her own bank balance. I'd gone to the kitchen for more ice. That's it. That's the whole reason I was standing in that hallway instead of at the table. And through the door I heard my mother's voice, warm as syrup, talking to Portia like they were discussing a seating chart. "Junie's just so easy," my mother said. "She hugs me the second she walks in. Ivy just stands there like a little stranger. It's not natural, Portia. Some children just don't take." Then came the sentence. The one with a comma in exactly the wrong place, the one that split my family down the middle before I'd even walked back into the room. "Keep the sweet one. Send the older girl back." Portia laughed. A real laugh, easy, like this was just Sunday dinner gossip and not a plan to write a 14-year-old girl out of her own grandfather's legacy. I stood there holding a bowl of ice like it was the only solid thing left in the world, and I made a decision right then in that hallway with the swinging door barely moving. I was going to find out exactly what send her back meant. And I was going to be very, very patient about it. Discovery 1, the draft. I didn't confront anyone that night. I smiled through dessert. I hugged my mother at the door and said I'd call her Tuesday. Instead, 3 days later, I drove to my father's old attorney's office under the excuse of updating my emergency contacts. I asked casually if there'd been any changes to the trust paperwork since Dad passed. The paralegal, a sweet 20-something named Raina, pulled it up without thinking twice and said, "Oh, actually yes. Your mother submitted a request for a beneficiary amendment last month. It's still in draft." A draft. Sitting there. Waiting for one more signature. I asked to see it. Raina hesitated, then figured I was listed as co-trustee, which technically I was, so she let me look. There it was in the sterile gray font of legal software. Junie Whitfield Reyes, sole beneficiary of remaining trust corpus. Ivy's name wasn't struck through. It was simply gone. I photographed every page with my phone under the table, my hand steady, my face doing nothing at all. Discovery 2, the confrontation and the jargon. I called my mother that weekend and asked her straight out if she'd made any changes to Dad's trust. She didn't even flinch. "Dana, honey, it's called estate optimization. she said like she'd rehearsed it. Your father's trust has a generation-skipping tax exposure if it's split unevenly between a blood grandchild and a... She paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound as ugly as it was. A non-lineal descendant. Portia's financial advisor explained it all. It actually protects Ivy from complications down the road. You'll thank me. Generation-skipping tax exposure. Non-lineal descendant. I let the words wash over me like they meant something, like I believed a single syllable of it. That makes sense, Mom, I said. I trust you. I did not trust her. Not for 1 second. But she needed to believe that I did. Discovery 3: What they didn't know I heard. 2 weeks later, I dropped Junie off early for a sleepover at my mother's house and came back 20 minutes later because she'd forgotten her stuffed rabbit. I let myself in with my key. I didn't call out. From the kitchen I heard Portia's voice, gleeful low. She actually believed the generation-skipping thing? Mom, she owns a catering company, not a law degree. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her. My mother laughed. The same warm, syrupy laugh from Sunday dinner. Dana's always been easy to manage if you just make her feel included. Give her a seat at the table and she'll never check what's actually on the plate. I stood in that doorway holding a stuffed rabbit, and something in me went very still and very cold. Not angry. Colder than angry. I walked out before either of them saw me, and I didn't say a word. Discovery 4: Following the money. The trust wasn't the only thing bleeding. I'd hired Portia 8 months earlier, against Marcus's advice, to help streamline vendor payments for Whitfield and Company. It seemed harmless. Family helping family. Except when I finally pulled our accounting software myself, late one night after everyone was asleep. I found a vendor called Larkspur Event Consulting LLC that had been paid $86,400 over 7 months for logistics support I had never once seen performed. I searched the LLC's registration. It had been filed 4 months earlier. The registered agent's address was Portia's condo. She wasn't just trying to cut Ivy out of Dad's trust. She'd been quietly draining my company, my actual paycheck, while smiling at me across pot roast every single Sunday. Discovery 5: The lie behind the lie. I confronted no one. Instead, I did something my mother would never expect from easy, manageable Dana. I hired a forensic accountant, Priya Osei, and I hired her in cash, off the books, meeting her at a coffee shop 2 towns over. What Priya found in 3 weeks made the trust amendment look like small change. Larkspur wasn't just a shell for skimming catering revenue. Portia had used Larkspur's business account, funded almost entirely by my company, as collateral for a personal loan to cover gambling debts. $41,000 of it, gone in 11 months at 2 different casinos. My mother's estate optimization wasn't protecting anyone. It was a 2-woman operation to strip a 14-year-old girl of her inheritance while Portia quietly bled my business dry to cover a habit she'd never told a soul about. I sat in my car outside that coffee shop for a long time before I turned the key. I made a decision that night that felt almost unnatural, like putting on a coat that didn't fit. I decided to become smaller. Here's the thing about people like my mother and my sister. They don't fear a strong woman who fights back loudly. They fear nothing about loud. Loud they can manage. Loud gives them a villain to point at. What they can't survive is being underestimated right up until the moment it's too late. So I played weak. I started slouching a little at Sunday dinners, letting my sentences trail off mid-thought. I started saying things like, "Oh, I don't really understand all that trust stuff, Mom. You handle it, you always know best." I let my hands shake slightly when I poured coffee. Nothing dramatic, just enough. I started carrying a small notepad everywhere, the kind you'd give someone gently losing their grip on details, and I'd write things down in front of them slowly like I needed the reminder. Mom said, "Sign by the 15th. I let Portia see me struggle to open the accounting software one evening, sighing, rubbing my temples, saying, "I really should just let you handle the books, Portia, this is over my head." Inside, I was cataloging every word. Let them think the door is unlocked because I forgot to check it, I told myself. A woman who looks confused doesn't get watched. A woman who looks tired doesn't get suspected. Give them a Dana they can pity, and they'll hand you the very rope they think they're using to tie you down. Marcus caught me at it one night, watching me rehearse a slower, softer version of my own voice in the bathroom mirror. He didn't ask why. He just squeezed my shoulder and said, "Tell me what you need me to do." That was Marcus. Steady as a load-bearing wall. "I need you to act like you don't know anything either," I told him. "And I need you to help me set the table for one more Sunday dinner." The bait was simple, and it was built entirely out of the very jargon my mother and sister had used against me. I accidentally left a folder on the kitchen counter one afternoon while my mother was over. A folder labeled in my own handwriting, "Trust Amendment, Final Ready to Sign." Inside was a document Priya had helped me draft. It looked, on the surface, exactly like the Real Amendment my mother wanted. But buried in the account routing section for trust disbursement processing was a single altered digit. A dummy account number that led nowhere except a monitoring alert on Priya's end. If anyone tried to move so much as a test transaction through it, we'd know within minutes. I also asked Marcus's cousin, who does AV work for corporate events, to help me wire a small recorder into the flower centerpiece we always used for family dinners. The same cut glass vase that had sat on my mother's table since before I was born. Nobody questions a centerpiece. It had been in every family photo for 40 years. It was the most invisible object in the room. Then I called my mother and told her in my new soft, tired voice that I was ready to stop fighting this and sign whatever she needed, as long as we could do it properly as a family. At the big anniversary dinner she was already planning, 50 years since she and my father got married. A party with nearly 40 guests, caterers, the whole extended family. My mother's voice on the phone practically glowed. "That's my girl," she said. "I always knew you'd come around." For the 2 weeks leading up to that dinner, my phone sat in my apron pocket during every family gathering, buzzing every time Priya's monitoring software logged an attempted access to the dummy account. Twice, during ordinary Tuesday phone calls with my mother, I felt it buzz against my hip while she talked to me about flower arrangements, and I had to keep my voice exactly as soft and vague as it had been the week before. They were testing the account already. They weren't waiting for the ink to dry. They were already spending money that wasn't theirs. The 50th anniversary party filled my mother's backyard with string lights, 40 folding chairs, and a 3-tier cake I had personally baked, because some habits you don't hand off even when you're plotting your own family's unraveling. Portia arrived in a dress I later learned cost $2,200, paid for, I would find out, through the same account that had bled my company dry. My mother wore my late father's wedding ring on a chain around her neck, and told everyone within earshot how blessed she felt. Halfway through dinner, with nearly 40 guests at those folding tables, my mother stood, tapped her glass, and made her announcement. The one she'd clearly been rehearsing. "I want to share something wonderful," she said, beaming. "After a lot of careful, loving family discussion, we've finalized how your grandfather's legacy will be passed down. Junie, sweetheart, come here." Junie, 8 years old, walked up shyly, and my mother pulled her into a hug in front of everyone. "This girl is the heart of this family." Then she looked past Junie, toward the back of the yard, where Ivy was sitting very still with her hands folded in her lap. "Ivy, honey, you understand, don't you? Blood matters. Some things just aren't meant to be split." A few guests laughed uncomfortably. Portia raised her glass like this was a toast to keeping things in the family, she said, and actually smiled at Ivy when she said it. I watched my 14-year-old daughter's face go the same still, cold place mine had gone in that hallway 3 months earlier. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. "Before anyone signs anything," I said, "I think everyone here deserves to know what's actually been happening to this family's money." I set my phone on the table, connected it to the small speaker I'd hidden earlier under the gift table, and I played 11 seconds of my mother's own voice from that first Sunday dinner. "Keep the sweet one. Send the older girl back." Then Portia's laugh in my mother's kitchen. "She'll sign whatever we put in front of her." Silence dropped over that backyard like a lid on a pot. I laid out the facts one at a time in order, the way you'd read ingredients off a label. $86,400 was paid out of my company to a shell company registered at Portia's condo for services that were never performed. $41,000 of that went to cover gambling losses at 2 casinos over 11 months. A trust amendment was drafted to remove my 14-year-old daughter as a beneficiary of her own grandfather's estate, a document my mother tried to walk through me 2 weeks ago, and one I let her try right up until this morning, when someone attempted to route a test payment through it. I looked at my mother. That was the account you both just tried to test 20 minutes before this party started. I have the timestamp. Then I reached across the table, picked up the same cut glass vase that had sat on that centerpiece for 40 years, the one that had recorded my mother's own toast, and I set it down hard enough to crack the base clean through. It wasn't for drama. It was because I needed something in that yard to break the way something in me had broken 3 months earlier in that hallway. 2 guests were already on their phones. My uncle, a retired county auditor, was one of them, and it was his call to the local financial crimes unit that brought a patrol car to the curb before the cake was even cut. Priya's paper trail did the rest. Portia didn't cry. She just stared at the shattered vase and said, "You planned this?" "Yes," I said, quietly. "For 3 months." Within 6 weeks, the consequences moved fast and landed hard. Portia was charged with embezzlement and wire fraud tied to the $86,400 pulled from Whitfield and Company through the Larkspur Shell Company. She pled to a reduced charge, was ordered to pay full restitution, and lost her wealth consulting license pending review. The trust amendment was voided entirely by the estate attorney's office once Priya's documentation was filed. Ivy and Junie were reinstated as equal beneficiaries of the full $1.8 million. Exactly as my father had intended before anyone tried to quietly rewrite his wishes. My mother wasn't charged criminally. The amendment had never been finalized, just drafted and pushed. But the county's Adult Family Services Division opened a file after Ivy's court-appointed guardian ad litem reviewed the recorded dinner conversation, and my mother was formally barred from unsupervised custody-related decisions concerning either granddaughter. Socially, the fallout was its own kind of sentence. The story moved through that extended family faster than any casserole ever had. Aunts who'd sat at that anniversary table stopped returning my mother's calls. The country club quietly lost her membership renewal. But I didn't let the fallout touch the people who didn't deserve it. 62 staff hours had gone into planning that anniversary party. My kitchen team, 3 part-time servers, a rental company that had trusted a deposit from a woman they didn't know was under investigation. I paid every one of them in full, out of my own account, the week after the party. I sent a handwritten note to my mother's longtime housekeeper Marisol, who'd worked for her for 11 years and had nothing to do with any of it, letting her know her position and her wages were safe no matter what happened to my mother's finances. Grace isn't the same thing as forgiveness. I made sure everyone innocent in that blast radius knew the difference. It was raining the night my mother showed up at my door, 5 months later. No umbrella. Her good coat soaked through at the shoulders. She stood on my porch looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, and for one long second some old tired part of me, the daughter part, not the mother part, wanted to open that door wide and let her in out of the rain, the way I had for 41 years. "Dana," she said, voice cracking. "Please. I have nowhere else to go. Portia's not speaking to me. The house is being sold to cover the restitution. I need my family." I stood in the doorway, the porch light throwing a small square of yellow onto the wet steps between us. "You had a family, Mom," I said. "You had 2 granddaughters who loved you exactly the same amount, until you decided one of them was worth less than the other. I'm not going to stand here and let you rewrite that the way you tried to rewrite Dad's trust." "I made a mistake," she said. "You made a plan," I said. "There's a difference, and you taught me that difference yourself a long time ago, back when you still meant it." I told her I hoped she found peace, and I meant it, the same way you can mean well for someone standing on the other side of a door you're still going to close. Then I closed it. Gently. No slam. I didn't need one. Marcus was waiting in the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea already poured, like he'd known exactly when I'd be back. He didn't ask what I'd said. He just slid a mug across the counter and said, "The girls are asleep. Both of them. Same amount of blankets, same amount of goodnight kisses." "Same amount," I said, and for the first time in 5 months, That sentence didn't feel like a battle line. It just felt like the truth. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up equally, for every single one of your children, without doing math about which one is worth more. If someone in your life ever makes you feel like love is a resource to be rationed, believe them the first time. And then quietly, patiently build the kind of proof that doesn't need you to raise your voice to be heard. So let me ask you, if you were in that hallway holding that bowl of ice, would you have confronted them right then? Or would you have done what Dana did and waited? Tell me in the comments. And if this story hit home for you, hit like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.